I am a big believer in what I call interdisciplinary rigor. I'm a big believer in not knowing things in only one way, and I want things to match. So I have done a mixture of just plain reading the books and actually knowing what Bensky has to say about it. Comparing that with what my teachers have been able to teach me about, Ted Kapchuk being one of the main ones, about what do these words actually mean? When they're, like for instance, the things that I've said about the minute the word yin is used, think nighttime, of whatever organ or element we're talking about, and go into what happens at night. And or anything that has to do with moisture. Whenever anything is dry, there's no satisfaction. When there's moisture, there's a melt, a mush. And so bit by bit, piecing together what the words actually mean as far as an embodied experience. What does dispensary feel like? What if it's here? What if it's here? What if it's, and learning the words and what the terms correlate to, so that I can read descriptions, because the descriptions of the herbs, the way the Chinese wrote herb descriptions, it's not the way I thought it was. See, it used to be, and it's because it's the acupuncture points also. This was a revelation that I had back when I was around 19, and Lonnie used to send me like an emissary down to study with Claude Lar and Elisabeth Rochat to Vallee, and I'd camp in my car for a week and listen to them and feel like I was in heaven. And Elisabeth would do these long descriptions of the different points and what the points were for, and she would give these lists of the symptoms for the points, and it's the same as, and they were all 911 level symptoms, right? I mean, you read all these herb texts and these herb actions. It's like for this and for that, and there are all these horrible things that I think to myself, a client comes in like that, I'm sending them to the emergency room. No way am I even going to pause to try this. It's horrible, they're this. And so I had reached a point where I was sick of it, where I felt like I just hearing about point after point after point that was completely irrelevant because it was just for these dire and dramatic incidents, for this and for that, and she says, and for the vomiting of blood and things like this. Which in me,
just like her.
Right? This is what it's like. And she said, when she says the vomiting or blood or something like this, I'm thinking, what do you mean the vomiting of blood or something like this? I was, you know those moments, I know them well from the inside and the outside, when the student asks the question just to derail the class? I was ready for that. Like, Elisabeth, what do you mean the vomiting of blood or something like this? I can't think of anything that's like the vomiting of blood. What's something like the vomiting of blood? And she says to me, oh, in that way she has this voice that I call deep compassion for total morons. It's wonderful, but she says, oh, when the Chinese says the vomiting of blood, they do not mean the vomiting of blood. And then she's done, she goes back to the board. I'm losing it. I'm feeling the floor disappear out from under me. Because I was completely convinced, 100%, that when the Chinese said the vomiting of blood, they meant the vomiting of blood. And what's worse is like, if when the Chinese say the vomiting of blood, they do not mean the vomiting of blood, what else that they're saying? That I thought that that's what they meant. Do they not actually mean? So she's back at the board ready to go on. I am desperate going, Elisabeth, Elisabeth, Elisabeth. If when the Chinese say the vomiting of blood, they do not mean the vomiting of blood, what do they mean? She says, compassion for morons. She says, they mean something like something. And goes back to the thing. I'm feeling like wow, wow, wow in there, and say, Elisabeth, please, Elisabeth, I know I'm having trouble getting this, but I can't think of anything like the vomiting of blood. Could you just give me one or two examples of something that's like the, I mean, can you think of anything like the vomiting of blood? knows of emitting of blood, of emitting of blood. When they say of emitting of blood, they do not mean of emitting of blood. They mean, when they say of emitting, they mean the stomach, and the upward movement of the stomach. As we say the blood, they mean the liver. So we have the violent action of the liver and the stomach. Something like this. Oh, got it. It's an energetic that's being described. The point is not the symptoms. The point is they give the most 911 level symptoms so that you have something blatant describing the energetic. They're like giving you like the end stage of an energetic, but it's a violent action of the liver on the stomach. It could be a temper tantrum. It could be all kinds of things making this sense of rebellion and rejection because it's an energetic. And they're just naming a few things in order to trace the fractal. It's a fractal, it's a pattern, it's just like to give you it's a personals ad. They write these little personals ads, and you're supposed to know what long walks after midnight means. You're supposed to say, like, you know what kind of guy this is by these short little descriptors. And so it was very important to me from her, and Ted, who did the same thing, learning to read the books very, very differently. Not reading them as a Western Euclidean mind. Western minds are Euclidean. In the English language, a word is defined by its parameters. It's defined by what it isn't. The word has a description. It has almost like edges. And what the word is the stuff that's within the boundary. And that's what it is. Whereas in Chinese, it's non-Euclidean, it's fractal. When a word is, as Elisabeth put it, she was describing another point, and she says that this character describes the center of a territory that has no boundary. And I had this done. I was in the states of needing to disrupt the class. So I'm like, Elisabeth, how do you have the center of a territory that has no boundary? I mean, how do you find the center? You look, find something, you go for the center, that's how you find the centers. And she said, oh, it's the center of the territories that has no boundary. How about the candle flame? Here is the center of the territory. But where does the light end? And the sun in the sky, it is the center of a territory, and it has no boundary. And the heart, the human heart, is the center of a territory that has no boundary. Oh. So too a Chinese character is a flame of meaning, is an essence that has infinite facets of associative meaning. That's what I mean when I say Chinese. It's a fractal language. It's a language of capturing an energetic from which we can expand that fractal, as opposed to English, it's Euclidean. It's like, it is this. It's vomiting blood. What's inside the box is vomiting blood, and what's outside of the box is not vomiting blood. Something like the vomiting of blood. Where does it end? It's an energetic, right? So just switching to reading the actual literature from that point of view and being able to kind of get inside. And I'm into impersonations. I'm into dressing up and acting out. And so one of the things I used to make my students do is skits in which they would impersonate various herbs and impersonate various formulas. And they'd have to be true to the various physical parameters, if they're Qi deficient, and they have prolapse, and they have to do and actually be that person. Yeah. That combined with what? I started obsessing about this when I was 17, now I'm 46. What is that, nearly 30 years of empirical observation of it. And working in a realm that I also practice Qigong and energy work. So it's sometimes difficult to know when you're being an energy worker and also empirical, what's coming through on what level. In other words, I don't know where does data end and intuition begin? Where is extrapolation and where is all that woo-woo stuff? Which is why I always want to see it come right back down again to the physical. If I'm working with people who already know the physical nature of the herbs, I don't go on and on about it as much. When I'm teaching beginners, I am nailing on what's happening with their body. People will talk all kinds of bullshit of an idea that they got from their therapist about what it is that's wrong with them. And they'll tell you all kinds of things, and you can't necessarily trust it. What is their body telling you about what their spirit needs? So I'm relentless about that level of reality check when I'm teaching on that level or working with an actual clinical situation, because the body never lies, and it will teach you all about what the spirit needs through that expansion of the fractal. So something like that. That and arguing with my colleagues until we agree on something.